In 2007, I lost him. He was shot and killed by Oklahoma Police Department. I lost my lifetime partner and my best friend to police violence during a routine traffic stop. The loss of his love and the loss of his life catapulted me into this work.
The man you just heard from is Brandon D. Anderson. In 2017, he said he had a plan to hold law enforcement accountable and reduce the need for policing in America. But it turns out that he was actually scamming his own nonprofit, which he formed for this mission, and screwing over his fellow advocates to finance a lavish lifestyle. So Anderson is the leader of Raheem AI, which he started because his fiancé had allegedly been killed by an abusive cop, as you just heard from the video we showed you. Now, here is where we run into the first pretty big problem. The New York Times found no evidence of the killing that Mr. Anderson has described. No homicide in the entire state of Oklahoma involved a man named Raheem, nor did any match the particulars of the officer-involved death Mr. Anderson had described.
Yeah.
I wish the people he was working with, the actual advocates, were aware of that before they decided to dedicate their time and their energy to this nonprofit. But they didn't, and they did get screwed over. And what I think is also interesting about this story is like the internal debate about whether or not to let the authorities know about it, to which I say, of course you should, of course you should. But we'll get to that later.
No, the part about, they want to abolish police, but then he rips them off. And they don't know what to do. That's honestly hilarious.
Yeah, go to the police. Yeah, let them know.
But and so we'll get to it in a second. But look, guys like this are but they're the worst. And so, you pretending that you had someone that was near and dear to you, and that whole emotional BS that you just did, and when you made it up, it's gross, man. It's super gross. But there's two other things about it that really piss me off. Number one, when people actually care about movements, right? Police reform, fighting against sexism, racism, et cetera, all those things. False charges or false stories like this make people much more reluctant to help, especially when it's the leader of a group that's taking money. Then people go, I don't know what's a scam and what's not a scam. Well, I guess I'm not gonna give. And that is horrible, all for your own personal gain. It's unbelievable. And another part of it, guys, is that it poisons the well for everything. So now everybody thinks that everything's a grift because there's so many grifts, right? And a grift like this in such a spectacular way, then it makes people go, oh, you're doing something that you are saying that is gonna help people? Oh, it must be a grift.
But look, I agree with you. They do a lot of damage overall. However, I think that a lot of people, myself included, felt super energized and wanted to change things after what happened in 2020, right? And a lot of nonprofits started receiving this massive influx of grants, donations, a lot of cash. And I think one of the biggest lessons I've learned in recent years is that I had underestimated how many people will take advantage and find a way to literally rip people off, or they'll exploit a movement in order to enrich themselves. And this is, I think, a perfect example of that. And so it might actually, in the future, convince people, maybe I need to do a little more vetting before I get involved with this nonprofit. Because you hear nonprofit and you just assume, oh, well, they want to do good work, it's a nonprofit. But don't get it twisted. There's a lot of shady nonprofits out there where the people running the nonprofit are really just looking to enrich themselves. Just take a look at their salaries compared to what they're spending on the actual mission that they purport to care about.
It reminds me a little bit of the Trump charity, where it was fake charity. He bought pictures of himself. He bought things that he likes, memorabilia and stuff. Bought 2 different portraits of himself that were gigantic with money that people gave thinking that it was gonna go to cancer and helping minority kids, et cetera. He had to pay a $25 million fine. I mean, these grifters like Donald Trump and Brandon Anderson are just ruin it for everyone involved.
They do, and I do feel really bad for, again, the individuals who spent their time and their energy working for this nonprofit, and then later they find that their resources were being squandered on this guy's lavish lifestyle. So nonetheless, like allegedly in honor of his fiance, Brandon, he founded this company, right? This nonprofit, Raheem AI. And here he is describing what the original goal was.
Raheem means compassion. And that's exactly what we think it's going to take to build a world free of police violence. We do this by building a Facebook Messenger bot that lets you report on your interactions with police. We then publish that data in real time to a public dashboard that's accessible by you and by the police. Our hope is that police departments will use this information as a means of designing interventions that speak to the specific concerns of their community.
So this nonprofit was relatively small, basically taking in about $4.4 million throughout the nonprofit's lifetime, but it did receive this influx of cash in 2020, as a lot of nonprofits did for obvious reasons. And he claimed that this whole thing that he wanted to push for was a complaint system about cops, basically Yelp for police, but it didn't work because of some significant tech issues. So the entire premise of the group was kind of failing, but the organization still had money that Anderson had access to. So guess what he decided to do with it? Go on a shopping spree. So let's get to those details. It is amazing what people really value. Like if they get their hands on some money, what they spend the money on. So let's take a look at that. He spent $2,000 at Bloomingdale's, then $2,800 at Bottega Veneta, an upscale Italian clothing store. After that, Saks, Alexander McQueen, and the online luxury goods store, Farfetch. In all, Anderson spent $11,000 in charity money on clothing that year, according to financial records. In those spending records, those purchases or the purchases were all marked Executive Director Clothing Allowance or clothes for ED.
Yeah, I'm not sure I've spent that much money on clothes my whole life.
I'm true.
Yeah, okay.
I can vouch for that.
Yeah, and no, we're not like charge clothes. Some of those stores I haven't even heard of, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, but of course that's necessary for police reform, because he loved the non-existent Raheem so much.
So there's more. One employee who later resigned started seeing the red flags and questioned these charges at the time. Anderson insisted that the group's board had approved the spending. But all three members of the nonprofit's board of directors for that year told the Times they had not approved any clothing allowance and would not have. It was a poor use of charity money, they said, especially since everyone at the nonprofit worked remotely from home. Now, Philip Agnew, a board member at the time who runs a liberal political group called Black Men Build, says, no, categorically no, not in a million years. So the board did not approve that spending. And believe it or not, this saga doesn't end there. So stick around for more insanity. So let's fast forward to 2021. And Anderson changes the entire angle of his group and what he's trying to do, saying his plan for a better complaint system was actually pointless because police could never be reformed, right? You can't reform the police, so a complaint system, a Yelp for police doesn't make much sense. So he said that he was actually building a brand new app that would lessen the need for police by essentially serving as an alternative dispatching system for just like an alternative to 911, basically.
Yeah. Okay, guys, so what's amazing is the people in Silicon Valley, there's so much money that they'll believe anything. They're like, oh yeah, your last app failed and you have a much more complicated app. Oh, but we have money allocated for this or that. Sure, yeah, go for it. Guys, and then let alone the small donors that are giving to this. The idea that you could set up a system nationwide wherein people call cops, don't call a cop. Instead, I'm gonna get something for you, a social worker or a doctor or a nurse, whatever you need specifically. and get it to you right away in your local community. Do you have any idea how hard that is? That is a near impossible task that would take hundreds of millions of dollars to set up that national network.
Well, he managed.
And he's like, I got an app, it's gonna be fine. Raheem loves it.
Okay, he managed to raise $1.3 million after announcing the change in what they're trying to accomplish here. And he also hired a woman by the name of Jasmine Banks, who served as the deputy director. And while Anderson was on vacation, Banks saw in the accounting system that he had just used the nonprofit's card to pay for a hotel, right? It's okay, he might have to travel.
Yeah.
He paid for a hotel to the tune of $1,536. She thought that was strange, a little up there in terms of cost. So she dug a little bit deeper into the nonprofit's bank records and found many, many more red flags. She reached out to the nonprofit's board. They investigated and questioned more than $250,000 in charges since 2021 alone, internal documents show. Among them, Anderson, who was paid a salary of $160,000, had spent $1,500 of the charity's money at a chiropractor, $5,000 on veterinary care, and an astounding $46,000 on rideshare services like Uber and Lyft. He gets around.
Where'd you go, Mars?
I don't know. I don't know. That's amazing, though. Most confoundingly, the nonprofit had paid $80,000 for luxury vacation rentals, including a service that let members stay in luxury mansions around the world, according to the board's accounting. And to be clear, it is absolutely illegal for a nonprofit's executives to do this, to divert their charity's money for their own personal use and lavish lifestyle. Anderson has denied the allegations. He sent a written statement saying that some allegations made about him were rife with untruths, but declined to specify which. He claimed it was all taken out of context. And for now, his nonprofit appears legally active, but functionally dead. Many donors have actually pulled their funding entirely for good reason. The people who worked for him, though, are understandably furious about this. They feel betrayed. So Kat Brooks, who's an activist who had brought Anderson into the anti-police brutality movement in Oakland, says that it hurts my heart to say it, but I think it was a con from the beginning. It was a con from the beginning. Still, they've decided against reporting him.
Yeah, it's so frustrating. Okay, so first of all, when I see the luxury mansions, $80,000 for luxury mansions, I always think of, in a situation like that, the beginning of Pulp Fiction. And I picture the woman getting up on the diner chair going, "This is a robbery." Okay, so now for folks who wanted to defund the police or get rid of the police,
they can't be reformed.
Well, but if you think about it, Brandon kind of had a smart strategy here.
I mean, it is literally the smartest grift in the world, right?
Yeah.
Right, you start a nonprofit, you get millions of dollars in funding, you use that funding to enrich yourself, which is illegal. You could suffer some serious consequences for that, except it's an anti-police nonprofit, so they're not gonna report you. Perfect crime, perfect crime.
And then he turns around and goes, well, I mean, look, we said the police were evil. So now they're not here to protect you either. So give me all your money. This is a robbery.
It's insane.
Okay, look, guys, these are allegations with a lot of receipts. But Brandon, and so this is my opinion, Anna's opinion. Brandon claims, no, I have secret evidence that some of these are untruths. Okay, brother, this would be the time to show that evidence because it looks like a robbery. Okay,
definitely.
And by the way, what should they do? Guys, we want police reform because they're, let alone the killing of George Floyd, we've now shown you countless cases of abuse and shooting Tamir Rice within 2 seconds and constantly assuming that someone is armed when they're not necessarily armed, et cetera. So we can go on and on and on, right? In order to reform that, you need to redo police training. It doesn't mean you need to get rid of all cops. Because sometimes bad guys come and pretend that they have a dead lover who they set up an organization for, and then they spend most of their time in luxury mansions, or however much time you spend in luxury mansions. And sometimes there's bad guys in the world, and that's what you need cops for. We don't want the cops abusing us, We want them to protect, serve, and to protect us. That's a fair ask by the citizens.
Yep.
And that's what we should focus on, not these absurd ideas about getting rid of all cops and living in a utopia. Does it look like we live in a utopia?
No, not at all. Things have only devolved since 2020.